this lecture, we'll be looking at the events after Luca. We'll start by looking at the consulship of Pompey and Crassus, and then Crassus's campaign against the Parthians. We'll turn to Caesar's activities in Gaul, and the crumbling alliance of Caesar and Pompey that culminates with Caesar's march on Rome. So after Luca, in 55 BC, as it was agreed, Pompey and Crassus are elected consuls, and each of them is guaranteed that in the year after their year in office, they will be given a long-term command. Pompey in Spain and Crassus in Syria for 5 years. Pompey himself decides that he wants to stay in Rome. There's the problem with the grain supply. He wants to stay in Rome, deal with that, and of course help win the popularity with the people. So he uses legates to govern for him in Spain. Crassus, on the other hand, now finally has something that he really wants out of this alliance, which is a long-term military command that offers him the opportunity to become as famous as Pompey became in his war against Mithridates. So Crassus sets out to Syria, and in particular sets out to campaign against the Parthians, this Roman enemy that Rome had just never quite been able to conquer. And so Crassus sees this as his great opportunity for glory. In fact, it's an absolute disaster. It's one of the most memorable disasters in Roman military history. More than 30,000 men are killed, including Crassus, and most importantly, the Roman standards are lost. And so one of the sort of sayings about this is, that the Romans have to go get back the standards from the Parthians. But the loss of the standards is an utter humiliation. And the image that just came up on the left-hand side of your slide is an example of what the Roman standards look like. This was the thing that hits on the pole that the legion would march into battle with. And so, having lost the standards meant that you'd been utterly routed, utterly destroyed. And so Crassus's opportunity for glory, in fact, ends up in his own death, the death of 30,000 Romans, and the loss of the standards. Caesar, in the meantime, has exactly the opposite kind of military success. Caesar also has an opportunity to become as famous as Pompey as a military commander, and he does so. In Caesar's case, his campaigning is located in Gaul, and in particular, he's interested in both protecting existing Roman holdings in Gaul, but also expanding them substantially, in the same way that Pompey had expanded Roman holdings in the east. So Caesar's sort of main focuses in the early part of the 50s is to halt these Celtic migrations. So the Celts coming down from the north, from the British Isles, who were coming down into what is Germany, Belgium, that part of the world, France. And so he's trying to halt these tribes from the north, and also halting the incursions of Germanic tribes that are coming from the north into territory that is Roman or is being expanded into Roman holdings. Caesar is enormously successful. His campaigns that he documents in his Gallic Wars show us the enormous successes that he has. His army really outmaneuvers these tribes, and very quickly he commands extensive territory in Gaul. There's a great cost to this, though. Millions of Gauls were killed, and probably another million were cast into slavery. And this is the part of Caesar's campaigns that is often ignored. That yes, he was a enormously triumphant general, but it was at great human cost. He himself and his soldiers, though, grew very rich. The Roman coffers were enriched, and these victories in Gaul, the expansion of Roman holdings in Gaul, allow him then to rival Pompey as a military commander. But Caesar's got one problem, and a big reason to need Pompey as his ongoing ally. Crassus is dead, but Caesar still needs Pompey. And the reason why is he's afraid of being prosecuted. And so as long as he is commanding a legion, as long as he holds imperium, he can't be prosecuted. He's immune. As soon as he has to lay down that command, though, he's fair game, and he knows that his political rivals will immediately prosecute him. So he needs Pompey to support his interests, to continue to allow him to remain in Gaul and to hold these commands. And the map on the right-hand side of your slide gives you some sense of where in Gaul we're talking about that Caesar's operating. And this is an example, a painting showing Caesar being greeted by one of the central Gallic princes, Vercingetorix, whom he talks about in the Gallic Wars. And here you have the greeting between the two. So back in Rome, remember Pompey has stayed in Rome, he's not gone to Spain. Rome is in chaos. In January of 52, we have yet more street warfare. The gangs of Clodius and Milo meet, and the gangs of Milo are really Pompey's men. So they meet in the streets, and Clodius is eventually killed on the order of Milo. He's captured in this skirmishing outside of Rome and is put to death. The Roman people are outraged. Clodius had a lot of support thanks to his efforts as tribune of the plebs, and the Roman people are outraged by his murder, really. And in response, they set the Senate house on fire, the Roman Curia. The Senate then responds by issuing one of their Senatus Consultum Ultimums, the SCUs, that allow now for they allow now for Pompey to do anything that's necessary to protect the city of Rome, including kill somebody. And Pompey is appointed as sole consul. So the Senate really throws its weight behind Pompey in this. And you can imagine, though, this scene in Rome is just massive rioting. The Senate house in the middle of the Roman Forum, or in the Roman Forum, is afire. It's really the anarchy, the violence has edged over into chaos. Pompey then passes various kinds of legislation that is intended to prevent further violence. He also makes it easier to prosecute a consul or a praetor who abuses Roman law during their term of office, and in particular during when they're serving in Rome, but also then he makes it so that there has to be a 5-year period that elapses between serving in office in Rome, so in one of the offices on the Cursus Honorum, and then serving as a governorship. And his point in putting in this 5-year break is to make it harder for governors to use that period as governor to basically pay off all the debts that they accumulated in running for office. So he sort of disincentivizes the interest in becoming a provincial governor. But again, it's also really meant to get at some of his fellow senators rather than to protect the provincials. At this point, in the final years of the 50s, we start to once again see the fragmentation of the alliance between Caesar and Pompey. Crassus is no longer alive, but Caesar and Pompey are really positioning themselves for a head-to-head battle. Each of them wants supreme power. The alliance had been united, had been consolidated by the marriage of Caesar's daughter to Pompey, but Julia dies in 54 in childbirth. So in these final years, there is a sort of gradual growing apart of the two, and a recognition that they're going to probably come head to head. Pompey is in Rome, and he's in a stronger position for that reason. Caesar can't come to Rome without risking prosecution. So Caesar tries to basically make himself present in Rome by writing the stories of his wars in Gaul that now survive for us as the Gallic Wars, but sort of originally were kind of field reports that he was sending back to the Senate, or at least that's how they're presented. In fact, it's really sort of, they're far more sophisticated than that. But it's Caesar's effort to make his victories, his fights for Rome, his popularity, it's his effort to cultivate that in absentia, where he can't come back to Rome, but Pompey is in Rome, and recognizing that he's going to need support of Romans, of other Italians, if he has interest in pursuing political office. So, in these final years of the 50s, we have what we might call a clash of the titans, but these two enormously successful, wealthy generals who have formed an alliance that is mutually beneficial are starting to recognize that it's no longer so mutually beneficial, that each of them yearns for supreme power. There are also various kinds of pressures that are forcing, particularly Pompey, to decide where his loyalties lie. In 51 BC, one of the consuls wants to replace Caesar in Gaul. So once again, threatening Caesar with prosecution. And Pompey is supportive of this. And when Pompey articulates his support of this consul's efforts to replace Caesar, he's effectively declaring himself an enemy of Caesar. He also opposed any deal that would allow Caesar to pursue another consulship without some kind of break. So once again making it impossible for Caesar to avoid prosecution. Pompey's really leaving him out there. Caesar knows he needs Pompey's support, and Pompey's not giving it. Caesar is countering one of his fellow senators that supports him, a man named Curio, suggests a proposal that Caesar and Pompey both relinquish their commands at the same time. The consuls who are supporting Pompey oppose this, and this is really just a battle now between Caesar and Pompey, and each of them are trying to use various parts of the Republic to their advantage, but it's really a kind of chess game now between the two. When the consuls oppose this, they also authorize Pompey to defend the state from Caesar. So at this point, effectively declare Caesar something of an enemy of the state. And at this moment, then, we have very clearly the breaking apart of this alliance. This is the end of it. And each man will now fight for his own benefit and the benefit of his allies. Caesar recognizes that he has less power. He recognizes that he's not really in a great position at this point. So he is trying to reach a compromise with Pompey, with the consuls. He also has the support of the tribunes. And there are various efforts to try to negotiate some kind of compromise that would allow Caesar to continue to pursue his political career when he came back to Rome. So, in other words, to avoid prosecution for his wrongs as governor. The particulars of the deal would offer him legal protection and military power. That's what Caesar wants. But it's not what the Optimates want. And the Optimates, this more conservative faction, has thrown its weight behind Pompey. They want an open clash. They want Caesar out and dead, basically. And so they throw their weight behind Pompey and hope for and fuel a battle. And it's important to note that at this point, in the very last years of the 50s, Caesar is trying to avoid a conflict. He's not seeking one out. And it's the Optimates, it's this more conservative faction that wants the conflict, and that is encouraging Pompey to pursue that conflict. The Senate passes an SCU against Caesar, so legally declaring him an enemy of the state. So once again, Caesar is in an incredibly difficult position. He had hoped that he could reach some kind of compromise that would let him come back to Rome, maintain his political standing. The Senate says, no way, it's not going to happen. So his choice basically is to just go into exile in Gaul or to fight. The tribunes who had been supportive of him end up fleeing north to join him in Gaul. They've been told that their lives are in jeopardy if they stay in Rome. So they join Caesar in Gaul. And in the very beginning of 49, on January 10th, Caesar famously crosses the Rubicon River. And you can see where the Rubicon is marked on the map on the right-hand side of your slide. The importance of the Rubicon is that this marked the southernmost border where Caesar could control troops, so where Caesar had Imperium. When he crosses the Rubicon with a legion, he's effectively declaring civil war on Italy, on Rome. And Caesar himself, though, feels like he's been backed into a corner, that his only other option is to just stay in Gaul, to go into exile, basically. And he doesn't want to do that. And so when he crosses the Rubicon, he is famously reported to have said, Alia jactest, the die has been cast. I've thrown the dice, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what number comes up. But again, important to keep in mind that Caesar crossing the Rubicon was not so much a move of aggression as the only option he had if he hoped to have a political career. So not so different from what Sulla's first march on Rome. A lot of similarities in the sense that their backs are against the wall. They, in order to maintain their political standing, they have to march on Rome. So Caesar's motives for civil war, first of all, protecting his political future, as I've said. He also claims that he's defending the Roman constitution from senatorial abuses. This is a little bit trickier to defend. It's certainly true that the Senate could be accused of mishandling their powers to declare SCUs against fellow Romans. That in fact Caesar doesn't pose a threat, and that this really was used as a political tool. But otherwise, it's a little bit difficult to make the argument that he's defending the Roman constitution, particularly when he's himself acting absolutely against the legal parts of the Roman constitution, that he is breaking the law in order to defend it. So it's a bit of a complicated argument there. Also important to note, Caesar's allies were not the senators. The senators basically either went over to Pompey or they stayed neutral. And a lot of them just stayed neutral. They didn't want any part of this. But Caesar's allies are the very young, those who were in disrepute, and the poor. He's a populist. It's essentially a war of the populist Caesar and the Optimate Pompey. The Senate itself took the position that it was protecting Rome from a tyrant. This was a difficult position to maintain, but it works. And it's more for propaganda. It's more to claim that Caesar is trying to seize control, and that Pompey has simply been given the powers to protect the state. In fact, what's happened is that the Optimates in the Senate have just sided with Pompey against Caesar. The citizens themselves wanted no part of this. They were terrified of another civil war, terrified of confiscations, proscriptions, really were very passive in the whole thing. Were not interested in taking sides. This was very much sort of a squabble of senators that just blew up into a civil war. Something to keep in mind, the evolution of the first triumvirate did not need to end this way. It's often sort of assumed that it was inevitable, that you form this alliance between Crassus, Caesar, and Pompey, and there was no other way that it could turn out except in a civil war, as the surviving members fought for supreme power. But in fact, there are various points, especially in Caesar's life, where there's every possibility that he's going to be killed in war. He's fighting for a decade in Gaul. There's every reason to think that he's going to get killed up in Gaul. The fact that Pompey ends up being aligned with the Optimates was also not particularly predictable. It ends up being a politically useful move, but not necessarily predictable. And Pompey himself didn't initially have a lot of political aspirations. Certainly when he came back from his wars in the East, he wasn't particularly interested in taking political power in Rome. And that was something that really evolved over time, particularly over the 50s, as he allied with Caesar, with Crassus, dealt with the threats from Clodius. So Caesar's march on Rome, he crosses the Rubicon very early in 49, and he's able to move south with very little resistance. And partly this is because the Italians just want nothing to do with this. It's also because Caesar moves south in a fairly peaceful way. When he does meet resistance, he releases the captives that are taken, nobody is executed, and he never takes any state money. Even when at one point a consular army fights against him and he wins, he lets everybody go, he doesn't take any of their money. So he's trying to do this in as peaceful a way as possible, and in a way that is going to ensure the loyalty of Italy for him. Pompey, on the other hand, actually leaves Italy. He decides that it's going to be in his best interest to go to Greece, to go east, where he's got tremendous popularity from his victories in the east. So in March of 49, he sails across the Adriatic from Brundisium and lands in Greece, starts to recruit forces, and plans his invasion of Italy. And he has a fairly brutal plan. His plan is to recruit these troops and to basically cut off supply lines to Italy and starve Italy until it's so weakened that he can move in. So whereas Caesar is coming through Italy trying to be as nice and gentle as possible, Pompey takes a really aggressive approach to the Italians, and for no particular reason. So you can sort of already see that there are really strong differences in tactics between the two. It's also interesting and important in the end that Caesar ends up in Italy and Pompey leaves Rome. He doesn't stay and defend Rome. He doesn't have the confrontation happen on Italian soil. He insists that it happen in Greece. And partly that insistence is an effort to disguise the fact that this was in fact a civil war. But Caesar's able to march south to Rome easily, take control of Rome, and he then moves on to Spain, where Pompey has a number of allies, a lot of military support, and Caesar recognizes that in order to deal with Pompey in Greece, he needs to cut off any support, any refreshment of troops, reinforcements that he might get from the west, from the western Mediterranean. So he goes to Spain and deals with the Pompeians in Spain, makes sure they're under his control before he goes to Greece. And in 48 BC, he finally is able to cross the Adriatic, and it takes some effort to get there, but he crosses the Adriatic and arrives at Pompey's camp in Dyrrhachium, blockades it, so thinks that he's got Pompey hemmed in. Dyrrhachium is in western Greece. You can find it on a map in your textbook. But Pompey manages to break out of this blockade and ends up going on the attack against Caesar and is sort of chasing Caesar around western Greece. So we get the framework or groundwork set for a face-to-face confrontation between the forces of Caesar and Pompey in Greece, though not in Italy.